One of the things I do love about the Oligo scan is it falls in line with what we've kind of taught practitioners through our clinic and through our team, is the biological score or Dr. Schimmel's work that really looked at, you have to look at the connective tissue. That's where it will store. That's what you need to look at, and no one else is looking at. But Oligo scan allows you that window without having to do a biopsy, let's say.
There's this, if I can read, Casper, here's Dr. Benning. He shared the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize in physics. And his statement was, if you can observe the atoms, you can test your theories and you can come up with ideas. Otherwise, you're completely blind and you don't know what you're really doing, by Gary Benning. So that's a pretty profound statement. And that's why I'm so glad you have the oligoscan and that you were able to look inside the body. And where in our medical world, they're not teaching heavy metals. They don't have devices to teach the medical doctors. They don't know the sources of heavy metals. And so all this is swept under the rug. And so this is a new area of research and pioneering for individuals like us to help the public.
And again, we're being exposed more and more. Maybe you can enlighten us, because there are some known mercury amalgams. You get it. Mercury's in your mouth, vapors coming out every time you chew. Vapor, that University of Calgary study showed the vapors coming off when they rubbed it a little. It's always being introduced into our body, into our system. Mercury is heavily toxic. That we can see almost or understand. But like you said, there's so many sources. You mentioned hibiscus tea and can you go over some that maybe are the more prominent ones that people are just missing?
Well, let me think about. Zinc is one that I think that stops the show right there. When I see a low zinc, I can't detox it because zinc is used in helping with getting rid of heavy metals. So I won't even start a protocol or with anything until we get their zinc levels moving in the right direction. And a lot of people don't understand that some zincs don't work orally. They actually have to do it under the tub, sublingual. For some reason, that works better because of all the studies I get back, and I ask them, they show me their zinc, and I go, well, you break it open, you put it in water, it'll work that way, but don't take it down. It just doesn't work. So zinc is the number one. I find corn and wheat, if you don't buy it organically, are very high. The plants have been genetically altered to absorb aluminum. Now, aluminum has no biological benefit to humans, but they get rid of, from the smelter plants, the aluminum dross, and they use it in our farming world. And when that gets into the plant, it depletes the magnesium out of the corn and the wheat. And then they process it, and then they make pretzels, pizzas, and they're on aluminum pans. And so by the time you test it at the end, the cereals and the pizzas are some of the most aluminum, have more aluminum than virtually anything else. And so, in the morning, if you give somebody aluminum, you give them cereal, and then you give them orange juice, you're giving an acidic that go with the aluminum, it just infiltrates. And the first place it likes to store is in the liver. 9 times more in the liver does aluminum store than the brain tissue. And they found that out in mice. So if I had to say anything, we have a whole, when we do the questionnaire, we go through their cosmetics, what are they brushing their teeth with? We go through their diet to see if we need to restrict anything. Parmesan cheese is one of the highest in aluminum. And then so we go through also the fact that, have they had any surgeries? Are there any scars? Because we find lymphatically, they're not able to purge any heavy metals. And so there's a whole litany of that really get people depressed when I tell them they can't have this or this anymore. people in their work, cement workers are exposed to a lot of aluminum. So it gets pretty long, and that's where I haven't come to your clinic to go over what they do, and because the sources are long. But I just let's put it this way: with aluminum, it's like you put it in a cake, it cakes, it makes a cake, and tortillas. So what it does to the stomach is that when it gets into the lymph nodes of the stomach, it cakes, so they can't filter out the heavy metals. So then you have the bloating, and then next it gets into the liver, and then we talk about the gut problem. And so I found that by using the surface of the skin, we'll get into that later, that is the best way to absorb aluminum through the skin.
Is aluminum the one you're most worried about right now?
The aluminum in its even minute form is, to me, mercury is bad, especially if you have amalgam over the heart and it exposes, it can drop into the heart. That can be immediate. The aluminum is a slow killer. It hides in the sodium channels of the skin, so it stops us from perspiring, and that causes the retention of heavy metals, even just a small amount. But because of gravity, all these metals have a tendency to be attracted to our feet because of gravity on Earth. And this is where the problem is. It gets into when aluminum hits the cell is trying to keep it from getting intracellular. So it will deplete itself of calcium, just like EDTA, and it will drop itself to try to find a way to get out of the skin. So to me, is that all the metals are bad. It's the form of detoxification. The other part is observing the 5 minerals that get depleted while we're in detoxification, and it's different for each individual. So that's the iodine, selenium, sulfur, zinc, and magnesium. And we can't get enough magnesium because we can't get aluminum low enough around the world. We stopped at 200 in doing the scans, and these are doctors and patients. We couldn't see them getting their aluminum low enough that it's always affecting the sodium potassium channels, the voltage, the spark of life. So aluminum does, when the body slows down, can effectively be the slow killer.
Right.
And so they talk about it in the brain, but nobody's looking for Alzheimer's of aluminum in the liver.
Right. No, it's a
doesn't make sense. They've got over 100 companies and clinicals trying to orally do something for dementia, and they're doing it orally. And I'm saying, we got to look at the liver, the gut.
Of course. I mean, and that's the thing. The organs of elimination are always burdened, and if you have these heavy metals and you're blocking those organs of elimination, even the skin, then you have a kind of a closed off system for these heavy metals to just accumulate, and you're adding more and more, and they become burden. And I think that's part of the problem with a lot of what I hear in integrative medicine, functional medicine, when you talk about, okay, I find elevated levels of heavy metals. My next step is to chelate them.